From Joe Cunningham becoming the new congressman for the 1st Congressional District to 2020, I sit down one-on-one with Andy Brack of the StateHouse Report for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio.
Andy Brack, it is so good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. Let me start off where you just talked to me about. Obviously, you were traveling on the road for how many weeks?
We were on the road about 4.5, 5 weeks.
Wow.
And I was working with some Australians to develop a documentary film about what America's thinking during the midterm elections. And it was absolutely fascinating to talk to Republicans, Democrats, Independents. We were in 13 states. We traveled about 3,500 miles on the road. We interviewed about 130 people, just like you interview people, but we did it in 5 weeks. And I mean, it was just amazing. What we learned is that I guess the regular media will tell you that America's a divided country, but the reporting kind of stops there, and that's not what people are talking about. People are saying, yes, we understand America's divided, but we want it to work. We want America to be united again. It's called the United States, not the divided states of America. And people from Republicans to Democrats want it to work again, and they're getting frustrated with people in Washington because they're not working for America. And I think that's probably part of the reason that you saw, the Democrats take control of the House again, is that because people, particularly in suburbs and in other places, are frustrated with this division that's going on. The people that I worked with were some Australian folks, and one of the guys named Bruce Hawker, who was the former chief policy advisor to the Prime Minister when Labor ran things, he kind of summarized this as saying America's unhappy right now. And I think that's a pretty deep conclusion, but it's borne out by what we learned from people. We were in Arizona and we talked to people at the border, and they were not really happy with what's going on with the border control situation. We talked to one Democrat who said it's not enough, and one Republican who said they're not doing enough. And so both of them, different on the political aisles, wanted to have more investment in technology, more investment in people to control the border. It's not all about building a wall, the simplistic solution. We talked to a young woman in Tucson who went to Arizona State, and she was a state representative who had been an undocumented child. And so she became a citizen and is now a state representative. And she's fascinating, saying we need to make sure that we have legal immigration. And I think that's an example, the whole immigration mess is an example about how most Americans agree on things. Most Americans agree we should have legal immigration. Where we disagree is what to do about the illegal immigrants. And so what I heard in America is, let's go ahead and work on the legal immigration, and let's get some progress on that. We can save the illegal immigration for later.
And you talk about Democrats in Washington. I got to talk to you about Joe Cunningham.
Yeah.
He will be the new congressman representing the 1st Congressional District. If you were to write a headline about him, what would it be right now?
Cunningham ran smart campaign, Arrington ran dumb campaign. And the reason I say that is I ran for that seat back in 2000. It was designed a little differently, but Joe Cunningham had the financial resources and did a great job in raising money. He developed a really good message, and I think he listened to people and made them feel comfortable with where he stood. I mean, if you look at the headlines since his election, he's carrying through on, he says, listen, I'm not voting for Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House. And I think that people are going to hold him to that, but he's basically doubling down and saying, I'm keeping my promise. I think that the combination, at the same time, Ms. Arrington, I think thought she was probably anointed for the position and did some dumb campaign things towards the end and was very aggressive. I don't know about you, but I kind of thought that Nancy Pelosi was running for that seat for a while, not Joe Cunningham, because there are so many attack ads about Nancy Pelosi on TV here.
And Maxine Waters.
Yeah, I mean, and they don't represent here. And I think for Joe Cunningham to say in his signs, low country values, that meant I'm your local congressman. You don't need to worry about these other people. So I think that he's got, I mean, listen, he won this election. He's going to have the advantage of incumbency when it comes 2 years later, but he's also a Democrat in a state where people are traditionally Republican. While Charleston is trending blue, remember, he lost in Beaufort County, Colleton County, Dorchester County, and Berkeley County. The Charleston area put him over the top, particularly the Mount Pleasant and the West Ashley suburbs. So, you know, he's going to have to build some coalitions in those other counties, particularly Beaufort County. And if he can do a better job in those at the electoral vote area, he could win re-election. But I mean, you know, it's an uphill battle for the second term.
And you talk about competitiveness. Let me talk to you about the GOP.
Sure.
Obviously, there are going to be at least, I believe, 10 to 20 people running for that particular seat in 2020.
Yeah.
Everyone from Nancy Mace all the way to L.A. Sunny.
Yeah.
What can you expect from the GOP in 2020 for the 1st Congressional District?
I think it's going to be a lot like Democrats running nationally for president. You're going to have every kind of Republican running for that seat, including probably Katie Arrington.
Right.
So I think that the Republican primary voters are going to have a clear, you know, a diverse number of choices. It will probably go to a runoff if there's that many people, and whoever has the most money is going to probably make it to the runoff because they're going to be able to get their message out. Who would be the favorite at this point? I have absolutely no idea. I wouldn't put it past Mark Sanford for running for that seat again. So you just never know what's going to happen, but I guess the safest thing to say is that people, you know, from Charleston down to Hilton Head are going to have choices, and we'll see what they say.
And what should Joe Cunningham's message be right now going forth?
I think his message needs to focus on his integrity. I think, and that he's keeping his word to the voters, and he's representing low country values in Washington and trying to take that. If you look at the news today, one of the things that Governor Haley, former Governor Haley, is being recognized for as the 2018 Citizen of the Carolinas, is she was saying in the news that what she did at a national level and international level was to take Carolina values to the UN. And so I think Cunningham, if he takes these, you know, South Carolina values of social pragmatism and fiscal conservatism to Washington, a Democrat can be successful.
And what values would Governor McMaster have in Columbia, in your mind?
You know, I think Governor McMaster has, for the last year, he's kept the trains running on time. He did a pretty good job dealing with the hurricane and making sure that the state responded well to people. I think what he's going to do is continue his message of fiscal conservative and some social conservatism, and I'm not sure that people in South Carolina are exactly as in step with the social conservative message.
And then they go from the governor's office downstairs to upstairs to the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
You said this recently, you said this, some SC House races need to be more competitive.
Right.
And let me break it down. You said this quote, sadly in 2018, 80 of 124 races for the House were not competitive in the general election. 42 Republicans, mostly in the upstate, and 28 Democrats faced no November challengers.
Right.
Although some had primary challengers in June, of the 44 remaining November races, only 10 had margins of victory of fewer than 20 points, meaning they were somewhat competitive.
Right.
How did we get here?
We got here starting in the 1990s when there was a redistricting of the districts. And what happens every 10 years is that the census is done to count people, and then the legislature draws districts. It's kind of like the fox in the hen house, because the legislature, which is interested in making sure, you know, people want to keep their seats and keep their jobs, they draw districts to split up where all the people are. Well, what's happened is that they're gerrymandered. In other words, they're drawn favorably to the incumbents. In 1990, there was a deal between the minority then white Democrats, there was a deal then between the minority Republicans, which were all white at that time, and the black Democrats. And they made a deal to redraw the districts that essentially made the white districts whiter and the black districts blacker. And what that did is it split the power in the state house, and a lot of Republicans won that year, and the black Democrats kept their seats. But it kind of put the white Democrats out on the fringe. And so the Republicans took control of the state house. Well, they redrew the districts in 2000 and in 2010,
Right.
and they further gerrymandered the split. So that when you look in the upstate, you look at almost a whole belt of red, except for a couple of places in Greenville and one place in Spartanburg County. I mean, it's just the districts are drawn so favorably that it crowds African American voters into just a couple of districts, so that it's really hard for anybody on the Democratic side to win just because of the way it's physically drawn. What's really interesting is if you look at those competitive races, the 10 races that we said were competitive, 7 of them were down here in the Low Country,
Right.
like J.A. Moore won in 15 up in the Goose Creek area.
Right.
And so that was a flip, and there's another flip as well. But 7 of them were down here, and 2 of them were in the Midlands, and 1 of them was up in the York County area. But there's nothing in Oconee, Pickens, Greenville, Spartanburg, all those areas, Anderson. None of those had any competitive races, and I think that's a shame. What do you do about that? I think you have to have the districts drawn fairly, and a lot of people are saying across the country that you need to go to independent commissions, not leave it to the legislatures to draw the districts. And if you had that, you've had fairer districts, and that means that people who are in the minority would have a better chance. I think that you also have to have political parties do their job. And the South Carolina Democratic Party, if it wants to be a player in the legislature, it's going to have to recruit, train, and raise money for candidates in these red districts so that the blue can have a chance.
And how well did James Smith do as far as training and raising money?
I mean, I think he did okay on the raising money. I don't think that he was necessarily that effective in getting out his message of why people should vote for him. I mean, we talked about this before, is that when you have an incumbent, it's really the choice on voters' minds seems to be, is there a reason to throw this guy out? And I don't think James Smith gave voters a reason to say Henry McMaster should not be governor. I think McMaster just powered on through and talked about his record with the storms and how he was working with the legislature. And I don't think Smith effectively communicated that difference, and that led to a split vote.
And let me get back to your documentary that you did a few weeks ago. Obviously, in 2020, there's going to be another presidential election along with state and local elections.
Yeah.
When you travel to those particular states again, what do you want to hear from people?
Well, we are going to go back, I think. I mean, we'll have to get some funding, but come January or February, we will have one film under our belt, and I think we'll have something to show funders that say we did a good job with this and take a look at it. I think that we would want to go back to the same places and ask essentially the same questions. Has the country gotten better or worse since we were here 2 years ago? How do you think President Trump is doing? Is he an effective leader or not? And I think that what we're going to hear is vastly different then than we will what we heard this time. What we heard in 2018, particularly amongst Republican voters, is that they want to give President Trump a little bit more of a chance to get some things done, particularly on international trade. I found it amazing when we were talking to farmers in Minnesota to find out that they are the ones taking the economic risk. In other words, their crops are sitting in silos. They're waiting to sell their crops. And they are the ones taking the risk on this China trade policy so that there's none of their crops going over to China right now. They even knew that there had been no boats filled with grain going over to China. They keep up with it that closely. They were willing to give President Trump 3 to 6 more months to come up with a deal, because what they're starting to get worried about, and I am not a foreign policy guy, but what they're starting to get worried about is when they grow their crops next year, are they going to have space to store it? Because they had a bumper crop this year, and they got to be able to store their crops. And so if they haven't gotten rid of those crops that are in the silos, we're going to have a huge surplus and the farm economy is going to be a mess.
And what else are you worried about when it comes to 2020?
I hope that that we can have some more unity, and I think that if we continue to have these aggressive tweets by the president, and we continue to have the fractiousness and the corruption and the scandals and all that, I think that people are going to get more and more frustrated. And I would say that what is going to probably happen is that more unity candidates will come out, so that you have people who want to unify, and that'll be the message of 2020. That's the biggest thing. You know, there is a whole series of political diatribes about American exceptionalism, about how America is the greatest country on the earth because of the Constitution, because of all these things. And I think what people are struggling with is that we still want America to be the greatest country on the earth, but is it really going to be that way if we continue to be divided and arguing all the time? It's really time to become more united.
Andy Brack, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.